we're going to get ready for Passover. So this is what I wanted to discuss. The coming days, we have some surprises. We get to see other things that will close with something we've seen in the Rambam previously. Now, I call this Tuv Tam Vadas, Tam, Tarte Mashma. We saw that Litom, the verb, sometimes means to taste and to test. Look back to a previous year about that, about what you're supposed to do with the chelis and the vat. Is it supposed to be tasted or taste tested? Big machlokas there. And sometimes tam means a reason for something. And sometimes it literally means the taste. Tam, the noun, it can be a reason or it could be a physical taste of something. So when you're told to leave something, it could just be to try it. Try it out for yourself and see what happens. And this is a line from the alphabetical acrostic Tehillim, the alphabet Psalm 119, if I'm not mistaken. David Melch said, Tum tam wadaf lamedini. Teach me a good reason, and daf, right opinions. So we're going to talk about this, the taste of the wine, the matzah, the mar, and the Pesach. So let's jump right into it. And I'll start now with the central thesis, and that what is the reason for roasting the Korban Pesach? There's one of the highlights of Haggadah Pesach was this idea that the individual rules of eating the Korban Pesach and how and all and everything that's unique to Korban Pesach is especially that. And we haven't found many of these rules regarding the consumption of all the other sacrificial foods. Even sometimes the sin offerings, the most holy offerings that the Kohanim themselves eat in the temple, are not treated as stringently as the Korban Pesach. For example, the idea that the Korban Pesach has to be roasted. It says that the Kohanim had the special privilege of eating the sacrifices in the temple, however which way they chose. That was a privilege God gave them. But with regards to Korban Pesach, it needs to be eaten roasted. It couldn't be boiled, whatever it is, pot roasted, unlike the other sacrifices. And we'll try to give a reason. I was trying to show here that according to the way Maimonides understands it, and the way from the Gemara can be ascertained, that the reason for this particular halacha that the Korban Pesach has to be roasted goes hand in hand with other halachas that are explicit regarding Korban Pesach, namely that the Korban Pesach is meant to be eaten. All the other sacrifices, eating the consumption thereof is, I guess, a bonus, but it is not the main component of the sacrifice. Yes, the Kohanim have to eat the sin offering, have to eat the guilt offering, and everybody eats of the shlamim, the peace offering or the feast offering. But for Korban Pesach, the main purpose is the consumption of the Korban Pesach. Unlike, let's say, the Sefer HaChinuch, who tried to offer a different reason. And this is an attempt to show that there is a lot of basis for disputing that assertion that he makes. So without further ado, here it goes. The first topic here is Achila Kodeshi B'chol Ma'achal. The concept that the Kohanim can eat the sacrificial foods any way they wish. B'chol Ma'achal is any way of cooking it. So this is the Mishnah in Zvachim. It's the 10th parak, the 7th Mishnah. It says here, Uvechulam HaKohanim Rashim L'Shanoth Ba'achilathon. Regarding all these sacrifices just previously mentioned, the priests are allowed to change any way they're eaten. That means they can do it any way they like. They give examples: Lochlan, Sluyim, Shlukim, Uvushalim. Whether they are roasted, cooked, or cooked. In this case, shlukim means stewed. In this case, cooked. Some things are stewed in water until they're almost falling apart, and some things are just regular cooked in a pot. And also, they could put into them, they could spice them with spices that are not holy, that is regular food. The Kohanim actually bring a salt, garlic, and black pepper, I guess, from home, as long as it's ritually pure, and you can use that to season the meat they eat. The tivlei truma, or they can use spices that are truma. Kohanim receive truma, they have whatever it might be. Once again, garlic and black pepper, so they can use that. That's what Rabbi Shimon says. Rabbi Meir says, what just happened there? Just changed, I highlighted. I'm going to undo that. Rabbi Meir says, Lo yitain l'tochan tivlei truma. The Kohanim should not season their meat with spices that came from truma. Why not? Because eventually that truma will become pasul. What is he talking about? The sacrificial meat has a deadline. Meat sacrificed today, let's say Thursday, can be eaten today and tomorrow, usually. But by the time the third day rolls around, if they have a refrigerator, even if they freeze it, even if they keep it in the pot cooking like a cholent, or they were to preserve it some other way, they smoke it or season enough with enough spices that they could turn into a salami. That meat becomes nothar, leftovers, and must be ritually burnt. Whereas truma doesn't have an expiration date. The truma, let's say the spices that the Kohen keeps at home, can stay there. He never has a point where he has to thoroughly destroy it. But if he were to take this spice, let's say, I mentioned in the previous days, we have a mix of salt, garlic, and black pepper for putting on steak or on chicken. If the Kohanim were to take that and it's made out of truma and add this to the pot with the sacrificial meat, it means that these spices would be part of the meat now, and they would now have an expiration date, a very soon expiration date, and it's likely that it will pass its expiration date and then have to be burned. So you shouldn't have that happen. I think the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon. So Rashi here says ufchulan. What is he talking about? Ufchulan. All the eaten sacrifices, ne'achalin, as opposed to the nisrafim, or that which is burned on the altar. Sometimes something is burned outside the temple, as we saw before, and sometimes it's a burnt offering or the entrails, whatever it is, even from the sin offerings. There are parts that are meant to be burned on the altar. Those go to God. But the parts that are meant to be eaten by the Kohanim, so they could do it any way they like. For example, to eat them the three ways described here in the Mishnah. The Gemara there says, saying that's the Gemara Sham, says, my time, what's the reason for this? Amar Kra Limoshcha. And we saw this word before. In this week's Parsha, Limoshcha, the Mem is part of the Shoresh. Mem Shin Chet, which means anointment. Anointment is, yes, it was done literally with the anointing oil, but we translate it as Revutha, which means greatness. It's part of their greatness, the privilege that the Kohanim have. Ligdula, see? The Moshcha means greatness. In Aramaic, it's translated as Revutha, which translated back to Hebrew is greatness. Kederach shamalachin ochalim. It is done the way kings do. See? A king, no one dictates to him how he eats his meat. So too, the greatness of the Kohanim, their privilege as princes of Israel, so to speak, is that they get to eat the sacrificial meats that they have been given by God any way they so choose. The Rambam explained this Mishnah. It was the century after Rashi says, Omar Rachmana, the merciful one said, Bidvarim shakwen ochel l'moshcha. He's basically quoting the Gemara. It says regarding that which the Kohen eats, it's for his initiation into greatness. Amru l'moshcha ligdula. Chazal tell us the moshcha means for greatness. Kederach shamalachin ochalim. The way that the kings eat. Matzilamar mat'amim u'machalim b'tvalim v'chayotzi behem. Means delicacies with spices and the rest. So that seems to be the kingly way of eating things, eating whichever way you like, which I guess just strengthens the question if someone were asking, really? So Korban Pesach, I would think, if it turns everybody into Kohanim, or if it's one of God's especially favorite sacrifices, and he wants to privilege us, he would allow us to eat the Korban Pesach any way we wish. And just like, for example, if a person brings a chagiga on any other holiday, the chagiga eaten with Korban Pesach also has to be roasted for some reason. But a chagiga brought on any other day would be possible. The Jew can cook it any way he wishes. Hold on one second. Take a slight break, as usual. Apparently, the world didn't stop and just take a break for our shear, so there's people still trying to contact me. Okay. Next, in Chulin, we have this teaching. Amar Rav Chisda, Matanoth kuna in neachaloth ela tzali. Hold on one second. Do you want a picture of these sources? Okay. It says in Chulin that Rav Chisda says that the priestly gifts, where are the priestly gifts? It's not talking about korbanos here. Previously, we said that korbanos in the temple can be eaten by the kohanim any way they so choose, right? They could cook it. But here, the matnos kahuna are something else. What are matnos kahuna? Matnos kahuna are pieces of ordinary meat, hulin, that are given to the kohanim from people who slaughter their own animals. So a person slaughters a bull for his son's wedding, he has to give certain pieces of that bull to the kohen. Those are the matanos. So Rav Chisda says, "Ein ne'achaloth ela tzali, ve'ein ne'achaloth ela b'chardal." When the kohanim receive these portions of chulin for them to eat, ein ne'achaloth ela tzali. They should only be eaten what? Roasted. And he says, not only that, ve'ein ne'achaloth ela b'chardal, and also with mustard. Okay, dafka with mustard. No, they can't use the matanos. Rav Chisda, this is Rav Chisda says, the matanos, the Kohen gets the matanos, he goes to the slaughterhouse on Friday morning, he picks up, because people, if people were eating meat for Shabbos, they would slaughter on Friday morning, right? So the Kohen goes to pick up the matanos, and Rav Chisda says he should roast it, and also he should eat it with mustard. Not just salt, garlic, and black pepper, dafka with mustard. Continues, I highlighted this in the sources as the red opinion, okay? Before, this opinion that Kohanim can eat their sacrificial meat, by the way, which is a bigger chumrah, any way they so choose, I marked with blue. So Rav Chisda says they could eat any which way. And that's Rabbi Shimon. Rav Chisda, who's Namora, not a Tana, by the way. Rav Chisda lived much later than Rabbi Shimon, and he was Namora in Bavil. He says they're supposed to eat it. They're supposed to eat it roasted, and they're supposed to eat it with kardal. And by the way, matanos still exist nowadays. Matanos is something they had in Bavil in the 3rd century, and matanos are something that exists in Eretz Yisrael in the 21st century. It's still around. My timer, Amar Kra, Limoshcha, Ligdula. Same pasuk. Limoshcha, the Kohanim's privilege to eat these things is their greatness. That's how it's translated. Kederach Shamelachim Ochlim. They should eat it like kings. So Rav Chisda says, what's the way that kings eat their meat? Specifically roasted and with mustard. Mustard is similar to the way we used to do it. The mustard seed has been around forever, by the way. Well, they used the seed to make what you and I call mustard. Yeah. The leaves that come from a mustard seed are very similar to what? Well, cabbage. They're all one plant. Yeah, remember? Mustard. The mustard plant is used to make cabbages, kohlrabis, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, kale. All basically one species. Yeah. Where the beans are, they say Well, they're seeds. So seeds they're basically the mustard, but you have to grow it. The way they grow it makes it have different shapes. So you grow it for its root, you breed it for nice big roots. That's called kohlrabi. And if you breed it for certain types of buds, it's called cauliflower. In different ways, it's broccoli. You've ever seen Brussels sprouts? They look like little cabbages. Yeah, you go see this. Look it up. Brassicae. The Latin term for the name of the species is brassicae. And by the way, sometimes it grows wild, so you could breed all different types of mustard and varieties from the wild one. Okay, so the seeds are used to make mustard. So Tosfos here says, now this is kind of interesting. Rav Chisda, they could have challenged Rav Chisda with, but the Mishnah says that afilu kadshim are eaten any which way they want. And that's the gedula. The greatness of Kohanim that they've been given is that they eat God's kadshim, mishuchon gavoa, that which comes off the altar, is eaten any which way they want. But now Rav Chisda is saying the matanos they get should be eaten like kings eat. And by the way, it gets into machlokes. The Gemara, as quoted by Rambam and explained by Rashi, says the greatness of kings is that they eat any which way they want. But here he says, no, it's a very specific way, roasted with mustard. By the way, there's some don't eat mustard on Pesach for some reason. Yeah. Well, now it's kidneys. So if you had Korban Pesach, you say, yeah, but Rav Chisda says the best way is roasted. Remember, when you eat Korban Pesach, you can put anything you want on it. Just can't cook it in a liquid, but you're allowed to baste it any way you want. Baste means pouring liquid onto it as it's roasting. And once it's on your plate, you could, whatever mustard and ketchup you want with it or barbecue sauce, totally mutter. So Rav Chisda, I guess, would say you should eat your Korban Pesach with mustard. Only for Sparta? Okay. Next, Tosfos in Dibur Maschil over there, Ein, on Chulin Kuf Lamed Beis says, V'im Tomar, the Verkol Tadir, we just said, here's what it says in Zvachim. Okay? Amrinan uvechulon rashayim koin lishanos bachila leochlon tzuluyin shlukin uvushalim. The Gemara says with kachim, you eat it which any way you want. It's a Mishnaic teaching. V'amar b'Gemara time mishum dechsi behula mashcha Perush Ligdula Kederach Shemalachim Ochlin. So Tosfos asked the question on Rav Chisda. The Gemara didn't, but Tosfos there asked this question. Venira divadai kemo shetov lo. Okay, vadai. It should be the way he likes it. Tov lo. V'nani yoter matzi achiluhu. The real halacha is whatever is better for him. The kohen who's eating it, that's how he should eat it. Aval adam shetov lo tzli kishaluk umvushal yochal tzli shu derech kedula yoser. Tosfos' resolution is, but someone who doesn't care for him, tzali, mevushal, or shalok is all the same, should choose tzali because that's superior. That's even greater. The greatest way is tzli of all the ways. So why didn't the Mishnah say that? That's still a question. It doesn't really explain the Mishnah in Zvachim because the Mishnah in Zvachim says explicitly tzluin shlukim mevushalim. So why didn't the Mishnah there or Rashi or the Gemara in Zvachim say, but really the best way is tzli, Mitzvah min muvchar with tzli. Okay, Tosfos, that's Tosfos' opinion. And I wrote a note over here. Vodi shlomar hani kodshe mizbeach shebechol machol v'hani matanos chulin shem tzluinu v'chardol. Tosfos didn't also note that. Well, Rav Chisda was talking about matanos, which is tzluyin, matanos, which is chulin, and the Mishnah was talking about kodshim, which higher level. But I guess that would be part of the kasha, because if one may eat that which is more chamor any way he wishes. So kal v'chomer, the chulin, the matanos, can be eaten anyway. Okay, but either way, we have this concept now that Rav Chisda says that dafka tzli is the way you're supposed to eat matanos, and Tosfos resolves this by saying that all of the ways that kohanim eat their matanos or their kodshim is acceptable, but for some reason, roasted is superior, more kingly. Okay, they don't mention it here, but technically speaking, if you want to get all the nutrition out of meat, let's say you are given a kilogram of meat to eat as your ration in the army, whatever it is, prison. So if you were to roast your meat over coals on a grill, let's say, a lot of the juices, which have nutrients, fall off into the fire. Whereas if you were to boil your steak in a soup and eat everything there and drink up the entire soup, all of the nutrition has entered you, right? That's the best way. I guess the poor person does it because, that's the most nutritious way of eating it. Okay, but I don't know does it really make so much of a difference? Is it because tzli is wasteful that it does this? We'll see. What makes tzli superior? I don't think the wastefulness of the nutrients is what makes it superior, but perhaps it is the one that tastes most as it is.
What makes softer meat?
Well, it depends on how hot the fire is, but usually if all meats being equal, if you have tough meats, then boiling for a very long time makes it the softest. Okay? But who says softest is best? Some cuts of meat don't need to be boiled. That's the difference. You can't just take every type of meat, let's say they sell downstairs by the numbers. You can't slice it thin, put it on a grill, and say it's going to be as soft as steak. Some of those meats, in order to be even chewable, have to be cooked for a very long time. Right? Well, whatever, or high heat for a long time enclosed. And if you're going to roast it, they have to be roasted for a much longer time. They need to be slow cooked, as they say. Still are inexperienced. You have experience with this yet? You'll learn it. Okay, so
Can I cook any meat with slow cooking?
Most meats can be slow cooked, but I'm just saying that some require it.
Not steak.
Yeah, not steak. The stuff that's supposed to be sold as steak should be cooked quickly and served rare. Doesn't even have to be turned brown necessarily, and it should be chewable. Okay, that's why different parts of the bowl are totally different from each other. So some has to be cooked more. We're going to get into this idea later soon. We're going to see why it is that roasted specifically is considered superior, at least according to these opinions. The Shulchan Aruch takes sides in the matter. The Shulchan Aruch says, the Shulchan Aruch talking, let's see Bikurim. Hilchos Bikurim. Who wrote Hilchos Bikurim? The Rambam. Okay? There's Bikurim and other Matanos Kohanim. We lumps it all together. First Bikurim. Bikurim are given to the Kohanim, right? And then the Rambam talks about Reishi Sagez and Bechoros and all the other things that one is supposed to give to the Kohanim, not Bechoros, actually. Sorry, that's not in there. Dafka, not Bechoros. Rambam talks about Reishi Sagez and Pidyon Haben and the Matanos in this halacha. It's right here. We have two copies here.
Are you allowed to put a tin foil underneath the tzli to catch on?
of Korban Pesach. No, that what has no purpose. That which drips off is supposed to go into the fire. It's supposed to be tzli eish. That which dripped off the Korban Pesach has a din of Korban Pesach. So they talk about the soles. Look, that's in the halacha over here. I'll reference you over here to look this up. It's talking about when you roast the Korban Pesach and he has soles to catch the juices of the Korban Pesach. Okay, so that's actually a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Look. Notach bin rotef shelo ala soles yekmotz bekom v'yashlichenu. Okay, it's a problem. Yeah, so you're not supposed to catch the juices from the Korban Pesach. If you were to do that with any other sacrificial food that you're cooking, it would have the din of that sacrificial food, like we mentioned at the beginning, no sar and everything. It would have the same time limit to be eaten then. Okay, good tangent. Now let's see in Bikurim. The Rambam says, "Ve'ena kohanim ochlin hamatanot ela tzli b'chardal." He holds like Rav Chisda. The matanos, the Rambam says, doesn't say, by the way, usser. He says, whatever you have, ve'ein ela, and this was an essay we put out online, and it's part of the booklet, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. You remember this part? Ve'ein ela? We bring a few examples. Whenever you have sages use this expression, ve'ein ela, ve'ein ela, it doesn't mean a certain prohibition. Okay? We give examples here. Ein simcha ela b'vasar v'yayin. Right? Ein simcha ela b'torah. Ein simcha katar sfekos. Okay? So wait a minute. Ein simcha dola mufares lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ela sameach levaniyim. Wait a minute. How many ein simchas ela? There's no what does that expression mean in Hebrew? Ein ela. We just had simcha referred to as four things. The only real true happiness is what? Basar v'yat. No, now it says here it's Torah, hatar sfekos, or gladdening the hearts of the downtrodden, the poor. So which one is it? Ein ela. When the Rambam uses this expression, it's not actually as certain as it sounds. It means the best way. So the Rambam says the best way to eat matanos. By the way, so you can read this book. There are many more examples you could find. Rav Tzuriel contributed to that, by the way. That was one of his examples there. Okay, it says don't forget to include this example. Okay, so good. Now we're Yotzei mentioning Rav Tzuriel this evening already. So when the Rambam quotes Rav Chisda here, it's not like a certain halacha. He says the best way to do it. Okay, why people sending me more messages? Hold on one second, please. Okay, fine. So the Rambam holds like Rav Chisda the way, let's say, Tosfos would explain it, the bestest way to do it, but not that it is required. And by the way, that's may perhaps shot in Rav Chisda over here, that Rav Chisda is not giving a certain halacha. He's saying the bestest way. Good. So now we understand. The Shulchan Aruch says, HaKohen yachol la'ochlam. By the way, the Shulchan Aruch is not talking about kachim. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't discuss sacrificial matters. It only talks about the matanos. So this is in Yoredeya, where the Shulchan Aruch talks about the parts of the animal that a person who slaughters for just consumption purposes is supposed to give to the kohen. So it's talking about matanos here. B'chol inyan sharev alav yoter. He can eat them any way that is pleasant to him, that the taste is the tastiest, like Tosfos says. And if everything is equal to him, it doesn't really matter. He should eat it roasted and with mustard. As Tosfos concluded, they resolved the Rav Chisda's issue. The Gross says there, HaKohen. He says, what's the source for this thing? What we saw here in Zvachim. He says the source for the actual halacha that a kohen can cook his matanos any way he wants is the din over here regarding kachim. If kohanim could eat their kachim any way they so choose, then kal v'chomer they could eat their matanos any way they so choose. My time l'mashcha. That's the answer. And the second idea over here that he says, yeah, but tzli is best. Roasting the meat is best. That's taken from Tosfos over here. That's the resolution over here. Now, this still asks a question, why didn't Chazal mention this preference when they're talking about the actual kachim? We find that, regarding matanos, so it's recommended, kohanim, you want to do it best, you can eat any way you want, but it's best to roast it. So why didn't the Chazal say this anywhere regarding kachim? that the best way to eat kachim is roasted. I don't know. I'll leave that as a kasha. Here we have the halacha as the Rambam formulates it regarding kachim. It's in Ma'aser Korbanos. We saw this a few months ago. We'll review it here. Mutar lechol et efa kodashim b'chol ma'achal. So the Kohanim could eat the holy meats any way they wish. Afilu HaKohanim mutarim lechol chelkam bein mikodashim kalim bein mikodshei kalim. The Kohanim can eat their share, their portions, whether from the most holy sacrifices, that's a sin offering and a guilt offering, or kodshei kalim, feast offerings, Thanksgiving offerings, etc. B'chol ma'achal, any way they so choose. L'shanot b'achalilan, change it around. U'locham tzluin shlukin muvashalim, to eat them roasted, stewed, cooked, and to put secular spices into them, just like the Mishnah says, but not truma. So you see, the Rambam holds like Rabbi Meir. So I was wrong initially. See, he holds like Rabbi Meir. He shouldn't put in these things. They shouldn't do it. But if after the fact, so it's still edible. The bones left over from eating the kachim. Sometimes you have a cow or a bull. They have some quite large bones that can be used to make tools. Nowadays, they barely use it. But in the old days, this was something. They could be used for any purpose. There's no treatment in them. They don't have to be burned with the leftover meat if they've been entirely stripped of their meat. So they can be used for secular purposes. There's not enough meat right now. The Kohanim should have a satisfying portion, but there's not many sacrifices today. Each Kohen is going to receive a kazayas of meat, so he should eat regular food with it or truma food with it. Imasova. So that's eaten with satiety. Oh, that's with regards to the korbanos. It means, the Kohanim should be satisfied, so they should complement their food if it's not a lot with other food, supplement them. Haitala and achila merubah. There's a lot of meat to go around. So they should not supplement it with secular food or with truma. So that this act of eating shouldn't be forced. Achila gasa means overeating when one shouldn't. And this applies also to shiari menachot, is not necessarily leftover meal offerings. It means the portions of the meat offering that are not burned on the altar that the Kohanim are enjoined to eat. Okay, so that brings us to this conclusion over here. What we get from this is, bottom line, that there is this concept that eating, let's say, holy meat, or the meat that the Kohanim get, should be done in the best way, and the best way is tzali. At least that should be, if all things being equal. But we saw that we're still left with this question: why is it that if tzali, with regards to matanos, is the superior way of preparing the food, at least from an objective standpoint, unless someone's highly subjective and he never likes it, so he shouldn't, why didn't the sages tell us this regarding the sacrificial meats? Okay, so we'll leave that question outstanding. I think it's because, actually, I don't know. I don't have enough information to offer a resolution to this question, so we'll leave it at that. But we will try to say that the fact that the sages never told us that with regards to sacrificial meat, it's actually better to eat it roasted from their point of view, the way it's prepared in the temple, must be that this isn't such a hard and fast rule, and that's what we could maybe derive from the way the Rambam formulated it. Ein ella. Okay? The Ein Ella formulation. Let's go on to maror. Ooh, Tom of maror. By the way, the word maror is a ritual word. Okay, maror is interesting because really the sages tell us there's 5 species that one could use for the mitzvah of maror. Right? There's chasa, and there's charchavina and tamcha, the rest of them. But the mitzvah is maror. Why? Because it doesn't matter which of the 5 you eat as long as it's maror. Why? Because the fact that it's bitter, that's the main point. As Rabbi Gamaliel says explicitly, we eat maror in memory of how the Egyptians embittered the lives of our ancestors. Where does it say that? Right at the beginning of the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus begins with the servitude. They embittered their lives with hard work. So the maror is zecher for that. So maror is actually named after what? Its taste. Okay? It's quite obvious that the mitzvah of maror has to do with the taste of maror. And if the taste of maror is ruined, it might not as well be maror. And not only that, it even loses its name on the holiday. Instead of calling it lettuce or calling it chives, whatever it may be, the other kind, what were the other names of lettuce? I forget now. They say chicory. That's a type of maror. There's halachically 5 marors. So the point is, one of the things that fall into this category, it's a lav dafka. Pesachim says in the second parak, 6 Mishnah. Elu yirakoth shadam yotzei behen yedei chavato b'Pesach. Here are the vegetables that a person with which a person discharges his obligation on Passover. Obligation to eat vegetables. When are we obligated to eat vegetables? On Passover. Midoraisa, you have to eat maror. If you have Korban Pesach, it is. The chazeret uv tamcha charchavina uv maror. With chazeret, that's not horseradish. Nowadays, because of confusion in the Yiddish language, we call horseradish chazeres, right? That's you can buy in the stairs. That's not the biblical stuff. Horseradish is not maror. It never was. It's a root. It's not a leaf vegetable, and it's not bitter. It's sharp, among other things. So maror, everybody who knows the halacha doesn't actually use maror for the obligation. Matter of fact, I used to like to say in years previous, I've always had horseradish on my Seder plate. I eat lettuce for maror because that's what I have, but I keep horseradish on the Seder plate. Why? Zecher to my grandfathers who could only eat maror. All they had, their lives are maror. They grew up in Europe. One grandfather survived pogroms. The other grandfather survived the Holocaust. So they lived maror. And that's all they had because they're stuck outside of Eretz Yisrael. So it's zecher for my grandfathers who had bitter lives, really lived through the hard parts of Jewish history. And I also keep potatoes for karpas, not because it's superior karpas, but also zecher my grandfathers who all they had to eat was potatoes, basically. They ate potatoes and onions for karpas, potatoes or onions. But then again, their meal mostly consisted of potatoes and onions.
That's why everybody put potatoes in.
Because if you lived in Eastern Europe in the Russian Empire, what's called Lita, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, place like that, Eastern Poland, all you basically had was potatoes and onions and horseradish. That's what you had to eat. So you made do with what you had. The guy ate that too, and beets. There's a reason they call it the borscht is associated with Russians. Russians eat borscht, but also Ashkenazic Jews. The Borscht Belt was a whole, place of hotels and Jewish-owned resorts back in the day.
Open up a restaurant of European Jewish.
Because it wouldn't be popular. Because it was basically you made do with what you had. So it's not l'chachila. Cholent, okay, fine. People do sell cholent. There are cholent restaurants near the Mir, right?
Yeah, don't sell borscht.
They don't sell borscht, yeah, because no one's actually sings like, man, I wish I could go back to eating just potatoes and onions all day. Rabbi Soloveitchik told us in New York a story of the estug. What's the estug? Estug is Yiddish for an eating day. It means a meal ticket. It used to be in the yeshivas in Lita, they asked Balabatim to take on the responsibility of feeding certain Talmidim. When you go to their house, that's who feeds them. Sometimes there's rotation. What? Yummy. We're talking yumim. Yeah, yumim. Es tug. Tug is day in Yiddish. Es is eating, and es tug, an eating day. So there was a fellow who sitting at the table with the balabas, asked him, "What's the brach on the potatoes?" Brach on the potatoes. The guy says, "What? You're a yeshiva bacher. You're supposed to be learning, Gemara 10 hours a day in Volozhin, and you don't know the brach on potatoes is ha'adama? Comes out of the ground." He says, I know when the potato comes out of the ground, the bracha is adama. But what about when it's finally coming out of my ears? Okay, that's all they had. Or my brother-in-law has a yeshiva song, Yom Rishon Tapuchei Adama, Yom Sheni Tapuchei Adama. That's what they had, and they used it in cuisine. So no one's kvelling over it here in this country. When Hanukkah rolls around, no one's saying, "Oh man, I want some latkes." Yeah, some people do it as it's a larth. But what's the more popular fried food on Hanukkah? Jelly donuts, because everybody loves jelly donuts. They taste much better than latkes. How much latkes can you eat? One day on Hanukkah, I could eat a few latkes. I could eat like 7 jelly donuts a day. Okay, yeah. Yotzein bahen bein lachin bein yeveshin. So let's get back to maror. The mitzvah of maror, according to the Mishnah, can be fulfilled with whether the leaves are still moist, that means fresh, or dry. take celery, leave it in your fridge for a while. If it's in the wrong part of your fridge, what happens to the celery? If it doesn't rot, what happens to the celery? No, it doesn't turn brown. It stays fresh, but dries out. It turns, like it's like brittle. Okay. No, kohlrabi, it doesn't have leaves.
Yeah, but it's both like white.
I'm not talking about it turns white. It stays green, but it turns really dry and flimsy. And it also comes apart, becomes brittle. That's what we're talking about here, yavation. Lo kivushin velo shlukin velo mivushalim. But for moror, you can't have it pickled or stewed or cooked. You cook the leaves like spinach, so you'll have a problem. Then you can't discharge your obligation. Umitz tarfin l'chazayit. And also any different types of maror, I guess they combine for the olive size amount. So if you have half an olive of tamcha and half an olive of ulshin, or lashin really, you could put them together, and that's a kazayis of maror for the mitzvah. V'yotzein bekelach shelahen uvdamai. And you could use for the mitzvah the stalk. Not doesn't have to be the leaves necessarily. Remember, the assumption of the Mishnah is that all of these vegetables have stalks and leaves. And damai also, you could use damai. Damai is the produce that has gotten from the Amaretz. You don't know if the Amaretz really knows how to take out the meiser, so you take it out for him. By the way, this is very important for today. This happens a lot. In the times of Yochanan Kohen Gadol, when the enactment was made, the assumption was that the Amaretz knew to take out truma. So it's not such a big problem in this produce, but he still didn't take out the tithes. So when you get it, you buy it from or whatever, you have to take out the tithes yourself, misafek. That's demai. Nowadays, our Amei Haaretz, who let's say pick fruit from trees. Nowadays, it's citrus season, right? People have orange trees and lemon trees and all that, clementinas. What do? Your Amei Haaretz will pick a whole bunch and just serve it on the table, and he doesn't know how to take out any truma or meiser. This happens. So what you have to do is, if you get, let's say, a bag of oranges from Am Haaretz, you can't say, well, I know like the takana is, I only have to take out meiser, but not the truma. You have to take out all the matanos from beginning, because our Am Haaretz don't know the difference between truma and meiser, and if they don't take out the meiser, then they didn't take out the truma either. Okay, not because I'm not changing the zero. I'm just trying to tell you the reality is you have to assume that's completely tevel what you get from them. So who's an Am Haaretz? The type of person who doesn't know how to take out truma and meiser. You ask them, did you take out truma? Do you know how to do it? Most people don't. Okay, so you have to be people who are in yeshiva or people who have experience doing this. Well,
then those people who just meiser everything.
Just meiser everything. Something.
Take a chip, meiser.
Really, a chip? Yeah, you don't take meiser from cooked potato chips. It makes no sense. But whatever. Okay, fine. And then they don't assume it's tevel. The taking out the meiser doesn't make it not tevel. You have to take out truma also.
Yeah,
They see every single potato chip. They take a piece of the potato chip and do that.
No one.
The one whole bag. Okay, fine. Just know the potato chips usually the potato chips has the kashrus of the bedats. The bedats people, one of the most basic things mashgiach does tithe the potatoes before they do anything to them. Okay, so just to know that. That's what the bedats is there for. That's why you're paying extra for the potato chips, so that if it's not a shemitah year, right? What makes the potatoes kosher? Like what can go into the potato chips? It's just a factory full of potatoes and canola oil and salt, right? What's their non-kosher? They're supposed to be mashgiching the tithes. He says uvmeiser sheni shenitla trumaso. The Mishnah says that you can use meiser sheni meiser rishon, that the truma has already been taken out of it. That is, the portion that goes to Levi. With Meiser Sheni v'hektish sheniftu, or what was Meiser Sheni, or actual hektish that had been redeemed. We redeem our own Meiser Sheni. We did that today. We do it all the time when we pick fruits. Okay. So I have a note here for myself. V'lomam bator nikru merorim al shem tamam. All right. Why is it called maror? If there's 5 different species. Matzah we don't call oni. We do call it lechem oni, but it's supposed to have taste like matzah. V'lu lo hayachin. Okay. Hayunikrin b'shmosam or shmosehem. If it wasn't the case that they're meant to be maror, then we would have called them by their actual names. V'chein isbir Rama Gamliel, v'chein bar Yerushalmi says this also, by the way, I'm not making this up. And shehava mina chazeres lo yerua miptei misi kusa. The chazeres, right? Maybe it's sweet, It has a certain sweetness to it. Because I'll say, no, it becomes maror when it's fully grown. It has a certain bitterness to it. Have you ever sat down and just eaten lettuce plain? I did that today. What? I did. You saw I did that today. I had a few extra pieces of lettuce after I finished. So I ate some piece of lettuce. I'm surprised. Lettuce don't taste good when it's the only thing you're eating. Right? The lettuce. I'm not even talking about any salad dressing. Well, well, I felt that way. Lettuce is supposed to be. It's supposed to complement the food. Okay, that's why people eat it. Let's read the Yerushalmi here. The Yerushalmi in Psachim, the 2:6. So the Yerushalmi says chazeres is, according to Yerushalmi, is chasin. That's a plural. Okay, so the Yerushalmi says chazeres in the Mishnah means lettuce. Okay, ulshin troximon, whatever that is. That's a Latin term or a Greek term. Tamcha gangidim. I don't know what those are. Charchavina, Rabbi Yossi, Bar Rabbi Bun, Amar, Rabbi Yossi, Chali. I don't know what that is. Maror, the one that's actually called maror, the one on the list, Yerek Mar, some bitter vegetable. Ufanav machsifin v'yeshlo saraf. Its face, that means its surface is gray or turns gray, and it has a sap to it. No, maple syrup is sweet stuff that comes from trees, maple trees. This is a syrup that's white and kind of bitter, actually. Yeah, from a plant. Okay. Imagine if the Torah had been given in Canada, then Korban Pesach would have consisted of of a moose, and you'd have to eat it with what do you call it, with maple syrup, right? If the Torah had been given to a different nation, it would have fitted that particular nation, right? But the Torah was given to us, so it fits for us. So hatevun, this is like a mesve, but in Aramaic. Okay, hare chazeres matok. Wait, isn't chazeres sweet? You've heard this kasha. Why is chazeres lettuce on the list of maror if it's sweet? Hare no kari chazeres elam matok. Chazeres is the sweet one. The answer: Rav Chia b'shem Rav Shaya kol atzman ein adavar talui ela b'chazeres. Really, everything depends on chazeres. Chazeres is the choicest one. Ma chazeres tchilasa matok v'sof amar. Chazeres actually starts off sweet, so to speak. Not really sweet, but palatable. And then it ends up bitter. Kach asu mitzrim lavosenu b'mitzrayim. So too the Egyptians did to our ancestors in Egypt. What did they do to them? Batchila, hold on, that didn't write it there. Batchila, what does it say? B'meitava aretz hosheves avicha v'esachecha. Pharaoh told Yosef, right? In meitava aretz, that's where you should settle your father and all your brothers. V'achar kach, what does it say? Why maruth chayehem b'avodah kasha b'chomer v'ilvanim. And it says the Egyptians embittered their lives, hard work, chomer and levanim. So it started off sweet in Egypt and it ended up bitter. So chazeres is the perfect example. Chazeres represents this very well. Bain kimushin. What is kimushin over here? Where do we get this word? I saw in the Mishnah it says yeveshim, but sometimes the Mishnah says kimushin. Is tanai tani avalo kimushin. Some say not kimushin. Kimushin means wilted. Okay. Some say that the Mishnah says you could use wilted leaves of lettuce or any of these marors to discharge the obligation. Some say not. Amar Chisda man damar kimushin bekelach. When he says wilted, he's talking about the stalk, so the stalk is still good. So you can use wilted stalk; it still is maror. Man damar valo kimushin. The one who says don't use wilted maror was talking about the leaves. Be'alim. Once the leaves are wilted, can't use them anymore. So they have no taste left to them. But the kelach, the stalk, still does. Rav Chia b'shem Rav Yochanan says, Zayt kavush omer lav borei priya eitz. Oh, this is a good one. If you have a pickled olive, you still say the brach on it is priya eitz. Rabbi Noam Bar Yefes b'shem Rav Yochanan says, Yarek shaluk omer lav shakol yebed varo. If you have a stewed vegetable that was supposed to be haradama, but now it's been stewed, so now it becomes what? Shahakol. Okay. If you stew a cucumber, it's no longer bori priadama, it's shahakol. And I guess this gets a little bit tangential, but I have the bottom line here that some vegetables are ruined through cooking, some are improved through cooking, some fruits are ruined by pickling, some are improved. Depends on what it's made for. So I'll read this line over here. Okay. Either way, the point is in this Bavli, this Yerushalmi, that we're trying to preserve the taste of the maror. Pickling the maror, like it says in the Mishnah, if you pickle it, you cook it, or you stew it, it's not going to have the maror taste anymore. And if it's dried or wilted, you have to look at it. Does it still have the taste or not? Okay, if whatever happens to the maror has ruined its essential maror taste, so you can't use it for the mitzvah. That should be pretty obvious. The Bavli there says, "V'chachamim lachin yotzim bahem, v'veshin ein yotzim bahem." The sages say that if the maror is still fresh, good to go. It's dry, can't use it for the mitzvah. It doesn't, you can't discharge your obligation. But they say if it's wilted, you discharge your obligation, but not if it's pickled, cooked, or stewed. Here's the Rishami's klal. Sorry, the Bavli's klal. Kol sheyesh bo tam maror yotzein bo. Whatever has the taste of bitterness, it still tastes like maror, so you've discharged your obligation. V'chol she'ein bo tam maror ein yotzin bo. Whatever doesn't have the taste of maror, don't. Okay, so there's one more source that's relevant here. What the Rambam says in Chametz Matzah in the 7th parak, right at the end, about maror. He says, "Morin ha'marim b'Torah, heina chazeret v'olushin v'atamcha v'archavina v'amoror." The exact 5 that was in the Mishnah. Kol echad mechameshet minei yarak elu nikra mamor. Every one of these 5 vegetables is called maror. V'im achal me'echad mehen o mechamesh ton kazayit yatza. Whether he ate for a kazayis from one of them or a kazayis from all 5 of them, combined it, stuffed it together. I guess you have someone who wants to make sure the children ask a question. He'll eat 1/5 of a kazayis of lettuce and 1/5 of a kazayis of tamcha and karchavina, etc., and put it all into a kazayis and eat it all at once.
One of those fathers because everything was together and gives out dinner. So we don't ask them anything.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, well, okay, you're not supposed to mush it. Yatza v'hu sheyu lachin. No. And it says that Rambam says that as long as it's fresh, the maror is fresh. But if it's dry, you could use the kelach, you could use the stalk, even if it's been dried up. If he stewed them, cooked them, or pickled them, he does not discharge his obligation. Why? Because, like we saw, maror, the point of maror is specifically the maror taste. And I like to just also keep score. We have not yet figured out why it is that with regards to the Kodshim, the sages ever didn't tell us what we eventually learned regarding the matanos. That is, Kohanim can eat matanos any way they like, but the best way is to eat it roasted. Roasted, barbecued. Whereas with regards to Kodshim, we just have the simple statement, Kohanim eat it whichever way they like, and there's no modification offered by a Rav Chisda or anybody or any later poskim saying, but the bestest way is to eat it roasted. Which makes you wonder why. Why didn't they add that? Okay? Or you say, let's say the reverse. If Kodshim, we have it explicitly, they can eat the Kodshim whichever way they want in the temple. So why do we care which way they eat the matanos? Matanos also they say they can eat any way they want. Oh, it should be best eaten with roasted with mustard, by the way. Roasted with mustard. Why don't they throw that in with the Kodshim? Okay. Still, the kasha is still there. God willing, we'll see an answer. Let's talk about matzah. Okay, the ingredients of matzah and also cooking matzah. It says in Maseches Chala in the Mishnah, 3rd parak, 7th halacha, haoseh isa min hachitinu min haorez. A person makes a dough out of wheat and rice. Doesn't mean whole wheat and rice. It means flour from wheat and flour from rice. Im yesh ba tam dagan. If it has the taste of grain is referring to the 5 specific grains that are like wheat. Wheat is one of the 5. So in this case, dagan is the wheat component, as opposed to the orez. Orez is not dagan. And dochan is not dagan. Any type of kitnios are not considered dagan. They're midgan, means they have properties like actual grain, and they could be substituted for it, but they're not halachically that. Dagan is a very specific example. Only 5 grains, true grains, count as dagan in Hebrew, and there's a few nafkaminas. They're the ones that they're used to make matzah. They're the ones from which you take challah. They're the ones that can become chametz, right? So he says, if it has this taste, it's made from wheat flour and rice flour. If it has taste of wheat to it, you taste it, it's wheat. So one has to remove challah from the dough. that means contribute that part of the dough to the Kohen. If you were to make such a dough that actually has more rice taste to it, it tastes like rice dough, so he would not have to give a portion to the Kohen. And if you're to make such a dough and turn it into matzah, and has a rice component and a wheat component, but tastes more like wheat, that's a taste, it has a wheaty taste, or let's say a barley taste, or a spelt taste. So he would discharge his obligation to eat matzah on Pesach with such a thing. What does this teach us? That technically speaking, the Shulchan Aruch brings this as a halacha. If you were to make a matzah which has a high rice component to it, let's say it's 25% rice flour, even though you still discharge your obligation to eat that on Pesach. Have you ever seen someone do such a thing? Use rice flour? We just got a bag of potato starch. Did you get a bag of potato starch? You didn't? Well, it was given out. There was a bag over here. You probably got one. You brought it home. You didn't realize. It was given out in the base medrash before.
So starch means like potato flour?
It's basically, yeah. You could use it to make, it is very, very difficult to actually make. It's not a good replacement for flour on Pesach. Okay. But there are ways you could use it to make matzo ball-like things and some other stuff. There are recipes. Sometimes you have to use a lot of chemicals, but it's not the best. But it can contribute to certain things. You just have to know what you're doing. Well, one of the things you could do is you could just make you mix it with water and it creates a substance that's fun for kids to play with. Okay, that's what my daughter does with it because it's just we don't use it around the house. So there's an experiment you do, look it up, you could do it. Okay.
Isn't Pringles made out of the potato?
Pringles are made from processed potatoes, like they really grind up the potatoes and all that.
Or not?
Well, I don't know if it's flour. I don't know. I've never seen how the Pringles are made. Sometimes you don't want to know how these foods are made. But if you want to try making your own Pringles, it's going to be very difficult.
Charcoal. Flour and chip,
So Machlokas Rabbi Avi Yosef's children. Excuse me. This dough, which is made from both wheat and rice, so if it has the taste of the grain, that's the wheat. It doesn't have that taste. I'm sorry, it tastes more like the rice. So it is not obligated in challah. It doesn't have to give a portion to the kohen, even if it makes a really large amount. And a person does not discharge his obligation with such a flour, such a matzah on Passover. That's the Mishnah statement. The Rishalmi there says, Masnisa deloke Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. It doesn't fit with what Rashbag said. What does Rashbag say? A different opinion. The opinion that we read once in the Mishnah just now, we attribute to who was it? It's the Tanakama. Okay, it's anonymous. But this Tanakama doesn't fit with the Rashbag. What does Rashbag say? Rabban ben Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, L'olam eina chayav b'chala ad sheheba dagan kashiur. It would be obligated in challah. Here we didn't talk about the amounts. Maybe it was, first of all, 50-50. What if it was still majority wheat, but it doesn't taste like it? Okay, he's saying shiur in this case means challah kashiur enough that if it was just there, enough dagan to require us to take challah. Okay, that's the shiur. Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says Halachically Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So according to the Pnei Moshe, I'll throw in the Pnei Moshe here. Hashiur hu shiur challah. Okay, you have to have shiur challah in the wheat component in order for the dough to be obligated in challah. How much is that? A whole bunch of eggs. It's called an isaron, right? We saw an isaron is also the omer and it's the shiur challah. So it's a whole bunch of eggs. The question was, remember they measured it. They mentioned my Sarav. The Vilna Gaon actually measured shiur challah. How many quarts it comes out to? According to our official book over here, it's 2.16 liters or 2.49 liters, according to Rabbi Chaim Noah. The new Mekilim, based on the Rambam, like Rabbi Rabinovich, who have very small revius. The revius is 75 ml, so it means the isaron comes out to about 2.16 liters, and that's shiur challah. But according to Rabbi Chaim Noah, it's about 2.49 liters of flour. That's your usual amount. When a woman wants to take challah, so how much flour does she use? 2.49 liters. The problem is they measure flour not by volume, but by mass. So what's the mass of 2.49 liters? What? The mass of 2.49 liters depends on the density of flour. Yeah. So I wrote this here before for hold on a second. No, I forgot the exact thing. But either way, that's the sheer challah, 2.5 liters of it. Yeah, that's the sheer challah. Yeah.
You can't think of this.
No, you could take off much challah as you want, but in order to get to the obligation, you need to use a certain amount of flour.
Yeah, if you do 2 kilos, 2.5 kilos.
No, I said 2.5 liters. Liters is a measure of volume, not a measure of mass.
Oh, and then your pie of it.
Yeah. And you can take off just so I have to figure that. If you have 2.49 liters of flour, you have to find the density of flour. So we'll look that up right now. Maybe someone will tell us. Does anybody here out in internet land? Wheat weighs 0.593 gram per cubic centimeter. 593 kilogram per cubic meter. A density of flour is equal to 599 kilogram to millimeters cubic. Okay, but that doesn't help me in liters. Okay.
Someone going 2.15 kilos.
2.15 kilos. Okay, that sounds about right. Whatever it is. I'm too tired to start doing the math now. I should have done the math earlier. Either way, Rabbi Gamliel's opinion is not like that in the Mishnah. Okay, it's not about the taste. Whether the Tanna Kama looked at the dough and said, well, assuming the dough is big enough, the taste of the dough tells you if you have of challah on here. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says the dough depends. Is there enough actual grain in there, wheat, spelt, barley, rye, whatever it is, to on its own make you obligated to make challah? Okay, so there's two different approaches to this. Amar Rav Hila, ben banan dacha ben krabanin dasam amrin ad she ruba dagan v'tamo dagan. Rav Hila says a different rule. Okay, says rabbis here, rabbi is there. They say in order for the dough to be obligated in challah, it has to be rov dagan and also have taste. Not shiur necessarily of dagan, but the shear of, let's say, rice and wheat together has to get to the volume of challah, and it has to have the taste of dagan, and it has to be rov dagan. So it has to be more than 50% wheat flour. Okay, so three criteria: more than 50% wheat flour, the resultant has the taste of wheat, and the total wheat flour plus rice flour gets to shiur challah. Which, by the way, it means that according to this opinion, you'd have, let's say, just 2 liters of wheat flour in there. That's rov. And the rice makes up the rest of the shiur challah. That's Rav Hila's opinion. Rav Huna Amar, Tama Dagan, Afal Pishain Ruba Dagan. The criteria is it has the taste of Dagan, like in the Mishnah, the Mishnaic opinion, even though it's not even rov. Marin Mishnah didn't mention rov. So you could have a shiur challah of flour, 2.5 liters of flour, let's say, and the majority of that is rice flour. But the resultant has the taste of wheat in there. So you still would take challah from this. You're obligated to take challah. Wow. Many different opinions. When we measure sheer challah, we're talking about the dry flour before we add the dough, before we add the water. Yeah. I could tell you're a man. You know why? Because women know this. Women say you first your sheer challah is when you dry the thing. Okay. Although I know one man who's probably taken more challah than any woman in his lifetime. My grandfather was a baker by profession, of blessed memory, and that was his recipe. My mother got a bread machine. Remember these bread machines? It was a popular thing in America, even in Israel. Sometimes you put all the ingredients in the machine before you go to sleep at night, and you press a few buttons, and early in the morning it starts baking your bread. It makes a big loaf of bread there. You remember those? You have that. So I got one for my wife a few years ago. Eventually it broke. Because always what the temptation is to use it as a dough mixer also. Yeah. So I missed the thing. It's actually quite nice. I remember having it when I woke up in the morning. So they're all different types of bread. So I think my mother asked the Agada goes that my mother asked her father for a good recipe for this. My grandfather started telling her, okay, well you take a 20 kilogram sack of flour and used to work in the bakery. So he of course always took challah. That was his thing. And the busiest day for the bakers, of course, the Jewish bakers, is when? Overnight Thursday. They work after midnight on Thursday to the wee hours of the morning, and then that's it. They wouldn't actually be baking anything already Friday morning. That's when they do all their work. So Yeah, so he took challah plenty of times. That was his job. Rabbi Yossi Avi Mismach le Rabbi Zero. Okay, he was Mismach. What does that mean? He was supporting him. Shema Kalei the Rav Hila Yossi of Masni. He heard Rav Hila saying his Mishnayos. Rabbi Yochanan Amar. They're quoting Rabbi Yochanan. Tama Dagan Afal Pishin Ruba Dagan. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is as long as the taste is like Dagan, even though not Rov. That's Rav Huna's opinion. That can be fit into the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan says. Rabbi Yossi says that Rabbi Yochanan says. Two different versions of Rabbi Yochanan. Ad Shebag Ruba Dagan V'Tama Dagan. It has to be Rov and taste. Amar Machlefa Hi B'Yadei. Okay, no, we got it reversed. Siman Havalan Rabbi Yossi Kirav Huna. Rabbi Yossi's actual opinion should be like Rav Huna. What? Tama Dagan Afal Pishin Ruba Dagan. Okay. By the way, what are we trying to get here? That's the bottom line of the Gemara. What is it? What does it tell us there with challah? The Mishnah said, "Im yesh ba tam dagan chayav l'chal v'yotzi ba adam yidei chavas b'pesach." All that really matters when you have a mix of dagan and rice. What does it taste like? We don't even look at the majority. That's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Okay. What matters for matzah is, does it taste like one of the 5 grains that matzah is supposed to be made out of? You know it's not leavened. So Rambam says, "Ha'osa isa min achitin min ha'orez imish batam dagan yotzi ba yedei chavaso." He makes matzah, and the Rambam doesn't say 50-50 or even say majority grain. He says it's wheat flour and rice flour in the matzah, and it could be the rice is the majority, as long as it tastes like a wheat product. He's discharged his obligation to eat matzah on Pesach. Isn't that crazy?
But you only have to have a kazait of rice
And a kazayas of this matzah, meaning that the kazayas itself, what went into this could have been majority rice, but as a taste of wheat.
That makes sense because every matzah has other chemicals in it.
Just water. It's just water. It's just grain and water.
Yeah, so the water is part of the kazait.
Yeah, the kazayas. When you have the original opinion was that when you eat matzah on Passover, you eat as a kazayas of the total product.
Yeah.
Not you have to eat a kazayas equivalent of the original flour.
If I put raisins or something inside
Then it's not lechem oni. No, that's not lechem oni. That's a different halacha. Okay, that's a matzah shira, right? It's a possible b'kisnin. When you put fruit into your dough, or you sweeten the dough, you put oils and sugar and juices and things, or eggs, right? It's called matzah shira. Might be kosher for Pesach, but it is not matzah. That's not lechem oni. What? It's hamotzi. It's hamotzi if you make a meal out of it. But if you don't make a meal out of it, it's just mizonos. It's possible b'kisnin.
Like bread with raisins.
Bread with raisins. Wait, the way they make a lot of challah, by the way, there are a lot of good Sephardic rabbis pointed out. You can make these challahs that have a lot high egg, oil, juice, sugar content, and even fruit put in there. It's basically a mizonos. It's hamotzi because you're making a meal out of it.
Even if the raisins are whole.
Yeah, that's a fruit. You're sweetening it up. You sweeten your dough with all sorts of things, it becomes a cake. It's halachically a cake. Cake is mizonos unless you make a meal out of it. And by the way, you can make a meal out of a cake. Because I'll said this, if you're pressed, you don't have lechem mishneh. You need bread, halachic bread. So take a cake and eat enough of that so it's kviyas suda. On Shabbos, I remember this actually happened to one fellow. He had a shalom zacher. He was very hassled. His wife had just given birth. He was barely home and anything like that. His friend hosted him for a shalom zacher late one Friday night. The guy shows up, everybody's post meal, and he says, "I haven't even had kiddush yet and eaten. Technically I didn't have a Shabbos meal." So I told him, say some kiddush. Bring the guy 2 whole rugelach and let him eat them. No, it's mizonos rugelach. I said, yeah, but if he's making his Shabbos meal officially out of this, that's all he has to eat. So the rugelach become lechem. That's what Chazal said. People were just so surprised to see it, but that's the halacha. There's a Shulchan Aruch here. Shulchan Aruch holds like the Rambam. Read the Mishnah Berurah there, and they don't mention rov. What matters is that the matzah tastes like matzah. There's a chart I have over here for the benefit of everybody looking. According to the Rambam, the Ramban, and the Rosh, if you have a matzah made out of wheat and rice, that's the way the comes out. You're eating a kazayas, but you don't even get a kazayas of actual wheat in there. It's mostly rice. Still, it has the taste of wheat, so it works. Well, if it's matzah schita sharminim or matzah from shardagon and orez, okay, it's not. It's either wheat plus, let's say, potato starch, or different type of grain, not wheat, and rice. So according to the Rambam, the Ramban, and the Rosh, Eino yotza yudei chavaso b'sheyesh ba tam dagon elim kain yesh ba kemach dagon sheyei kazayis b'chtei achilas pras. They say that first you have to have both the taste of the grain in there and also kazayis kedei achilas pras. It's not majority grain yet in the mix, but in the kedei achilas pras time, the 9 minutes or so, you manage to eat a kazayis worth of original wheat flour in there. Okay, and the more stringent opinion is the Ravid and the Rabbeinu Chananel, who say that okay, you actually need enough grain in there, a kazayas, that you're eating in kedei achilas pras. It has the taste of dagon, and we don't look at the majority. What was the majority in the mix when you first did it? 50 was a majority wheat flour, but you still have to have enough wheat matzah in their component that you ate that in kedei achilas pras. That's the Ravad's halacha. And there's another thing here. It says afilu. I left out the aleph. I have to put the aleph in here. If it's some other type of material in there, afilu b'kedei achilas pras nami lo mipnei lachshuve kol isa kechula dagan eno elim ken yesh rav dagan miut orez o sharminim. If it's something else, sharminim, let's say, so you have to make sure they're the miut. You'd actually even need rove. Okay, there's a gra here. They added, this is for I guess extra credit. He says it's the Ravid, this idea over here. There's a doctorat, they said. They've only gone talking about Tam Ke'ikr and Kiyam Mitzvos and Tarovis Isser. Tam Ke'ikr helps us in two ways. Did you eat enough of the Tam to fulfill your obligation? And the Hefich is the Tam, the Isser. Tam Ke'ikr, just essence, just a little bit of taste of Isser in the mix. So that counts as the actual Isser. We'd even give him Malkus for such a thing. He says this is attributed to Ravid, who said, V'u sheyesh bo kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. In order to discharge obligation, you need kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. Well, no, Rambam says not kazayis b'chdei achilas pras of the dagon. Rambam would say you have to eat a kazayis of matzah kedei achilas pras. If the matzah is made of rice and wheat, you don't have to make sure that you're eating a kazayis worth of wheat in kedei achilas pras.
So we said that about isu, someone needs kedei achilas pras of isu, that's matzah.
Yes.
It doesn't say the same thing.
No, apparently not with regards to discharging obligation. The nafkamina is if you had a flour dough that was made from 50% wheat and 50% rice, and you made matzah of it, and it has a taste of wheat. The Ram would say eat a kazayas of that whole matzah. One kazayas is good enough, even though the kazayas itself is 50% wheat and 50% rice. The Raiva would say you have to eat two kazayasim. Why? Because you want to make sure that you're getting a total of one kazayas that comes from the wheat component. That's the Ravid's chumrah. Okay. And he says this is based on Rashbag, because Rashbag had the more chumrah opinion in the Rishalmi, where it says you need shir challah in the wheat component itself. So too, to discharge your obligation of eating kazayas of matzah on Passover, you needed a shir kazayas of the matzah have been produced by the wheat flour. There's another line over here. He mentions Rav Huna's opinion, and whatever. We don't have time for that, so we should see it. He says, "Aval Rambam Satan Kan v'chein of Hilchas Chala masker filu einbo kazayas b'chdei achilas pras." Mufarish, sorry. Mufarish afilu einbo kazayas b'chdei achilas pras ve'einbo kashiur. Okay, you've still discharged obligation, even though there's no actual kazayas in kedei achilas pras of the wheat. The wheat could even be the minority of the dough. And that's what the Ramban and the Rush says also in Hilchos Chala, and the Magen Mishnah Sham, Mishum Gerera, V'davka b'chitim v'orez, d'orez nigrar achar chitim. Here's the reason for this distinction. Orez nigrar achar chitim. If you put in orez, even if it's the majority, but it's with wheat, so you get a nice wheaty taste. V'atam kimo dekimluhu she'ein ba lidei chinutz. Okay, and the reason for this, by the way, is that rice doesn't become chametz. It's not a problem. Ela chamishas minim. The five the five grains actually become chametz. L'chach ein yotzin yidei chovasim b'fesach ve'ein chayav b'chala. Okay, and that's why if you were to only eat rice on Passover, you wouldn't discharge your obligation, and rice is not obligated in challah. V'chein kamilan de orez nigrar charchitim afilu ein bo kazayis b'chlev v'prasim chametz v'chein yotzei. But if you combine the rice with the wheat, chametz will happen. Okay, chametzing with wheat will happen. Even if you don't have in every portion that you're eating enough actual wheat, an olive size amount in there. So it becomes chametz.
Yeah, chametz is not like the best.
No, but it becomes chametz. That's just a ritual thing. The taste of chametz can be bata be'elef, but Chazal made a gzeira that because you're not mivdal from chametz, you should treat any tarovas of chametz as usher. Here he's just talking a technical, scientific thing. If you mix wheat with flour, with rice in the dough, it'll start rising like wheat. It'll become chametz. Somehow the wheat has enough enzymes in it that shares it with the rice is normally lacking. Why doesn't rice become chametz? It goes through serachon. It doesn't have the right chemicals in it to leaven. But when you give it a little bit of wheat in there, enough that gives it the taste of wheat, that's also enough to share its power to cause it to leaven. Wow, very interesting. Last halacha, hilchos chametz and matzah. The Rambam says that different things you could eat for matzah, right? The Rambam says, is there a way you have to bake your matzah? Most people think that because for the last 200 years we found convenient ways to bake matzah, it has to be that way. But the Rambam disagrees. Ram says, "Ach echad matzah shnefei patanur o bilpas, ben shehid bika batzeik bilpas v'achar kach yitiach, ben sheyitiach v'achar kach yidbik." Matzah that he baked in the oven, or just on a pan, like we do. Okay, oven means surrounded by heat. Bilpas means the fire's just below it. Ben shehid bika batzeik bilpas v'achar kach yitiach. Whether he stuck the dough in the pan and then he put it over the fire. Or he heats up the pan and then he sticks the dough into there. Even if he baked it on the ground, like the Arabs do, they have a small coal fire right in the ground, stuck it right in the ground. He can discharge his obligation with that matzah. Doesn't how you bake your matzah, as long as it's a good dough. There's an infinite number of ways you can imagine how to bake matzah. Let's say it wasn't completely baked. You could still eat that as matzah. As long as when you break open the matzah, it's not like so uncooked that you actually see it's still doughy. And like, what?
Like half baked.
Yeah. So the Rambam says minimally baked. By the way, where do they do this? Like the classic story when I was in the matzah factory. Which matzahs are baked less than the other matzahs? The assembly line that makes matzahs for actual matzah eating bakes them good, toasts them. But there was another assembly line on the opposite side of the factory that's baking matzahs that are much longer. They're not cut in this direction, only cut in that direction. So the matzahs are as wide as a matzah, but 5 long. And they're not baked as dark. What happens to those? They fall right through a hole in the floor into the grinder. That's where they make matzah meal. Because if matzah meal were to be made from actual matzahs that were baked good, so it would have too much brown to it. It would taste, dark. But matzah meal, they want as a replacement for flour. So those are baked more gently. Okay. Yeah, it was this very big surprise to see it. I told you what I did to the guys. Told them, okay, can I take one of those big matzahs off the assembly line? So no one ever asked for that. I said, why? It's the Rebbe's matzah. It's a nice big, 5 times as big as an ordinary matzah. And it took me. It was a rainy, windy day that Rosh Chodesh Nisan or Erev Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and I managed to get it home in the car with the outside and all that. And my wife broke it when she put it on the table to take pictures of it. Like, look at our matzah for Pesach. Okay, fine. V'yotzin barakika sharui. Here's another leniency. Technically, if a person soaks his matzah, let's say you take your whole machine matzah, you wet it, you sprinkle water on it so it becomes soft. People can do this, by the way, right? As long as you're not worried that's going to cause it to become chametz, which is, yeah. But no one was ever worried about shri until the last 200 years, by the way. There wasn't the havamina. Otherwise, one would say, V'yotzim barakika sharui, he would have said, and karakika sharui, shema, it became chametz, so, you have to dispose of it. Rambam says you could actually discharge your obligation. Who shalo ni moach, as long as it didn't disintegrate from it. It hasn't completely dissolved.
Completely dissolved, it's an issue.
That wouldn't be, you can't, it's still halachically kosher. You're just not discharging your obligation to eat matzah. Aval matzah shebishla, eno yotzei b'dei chava, so sharei ein batama pas. It doesn't have any taste anymore. The whole point of this, all these halachas that we saw, is that what makes matzah matzah, and you discharge your obligation, the taste of the wheat in the matzah. It could even be, according to many opinions, majority rice, but it tastes like wheat. Like the Vilgon says, the wheat makes the rice leaven. It has that taste of wheat, so that's what gives it. That's from the Mishnah. So far we've talked about taste of korbanos, we talked about the taste of maror, and we talked about the taste of matzah. What do we see? What's going on here? Unlike any other time of the year, the only when you eat on anything on Shabbos, does it have to have a particular taste? No. You eat any kachim, whether kohen or a hedyot or a zar. Eat kachim all year round. Does it have to taste a particular way? No. We saw, halachically speaking, kachim don't have that. That was the whole question, because they said the best way to eat matanos is roast it with mustard. But in Achinami, the halacha was he could eat it any way he wants. The best way is tzli according with for matanos, but then you have the kasha. So why don't they mention the best way also for kachim? Okay. By the way, there's no halacha, there's no obligation. There's no thing you didn't discharge. If you drank a type of wine on Shabbos, nowadays they have all Chazal talk about spicing wine and sweetening wine, doing all sorts of things to wine, right? You can make kiddush on it. They come up with even crazier wines. There's a wine over there. I tasted it today. I told you what was wrong with that wine, right? It looks like white wine, right? Yeah, you tasted it. It tastes off. And then you look at the ingredients. This is 80% wine, 20% glucose syrup. Ugh. Okay, it's basically liquid diabetes, diabetes in a bottle. So why would they do such a thing? They ruin the wine. So yeah, I guess it says like Jewish Kiddush wine on it. So I guess it's stereotypical. Okay, fine. So we've never had such a thing, but we see this. And I ask a question here, Manali the Rambam, Sheino Yotze Yedei Chovaso b'matzah v'sheles. Okay? Where did Rambam get this line about matzah mivusheles? I didn't give unlike all the other halachas, we first saw the Talmudic sources, and then we saw the halacha. But this line that the matzah cannot be cooked because it loses the taste of matzah, or loses the taste of the pas. What's pas? Bread or cake baked as is. Pas as opposed to a tavshil, right? So pas has to have normally pas has a tsura, right? Tsura pas is also one of the usual things that comes up to halacha. Tarita the nama, the shape of the bread, or the cookie as it may be. But in this case, I'm asking a question: where did the Rambam get this halacha that matzah mivusheles no longer tastes like pas? Let's say I take a whole matzah, standard machine matzah, and I just boil a little bit of water on the stove. I throw in the matzah, just enough to cook that matzah. And then I taste this resulting water, no salt, just water and matzah. When I taste it, you're telling me this tastes like a cooked matzah, but doesn't taste like matzah anymore because matzah is supposed to be baked, right? It would. All there is water and matzah. What other flavors are in there? It changes it. There's something wrong about a cooked matzah. Okay, something's been ruined, even if it's just water and matzah, but already it doesn't have time of pas. It's like a matzah porridge, right? This is important. The question is, where did Rambam get this from? And that's what we're going to get into. We'll start it this week, and God willing, we'll answer it next week because it's quite amazing. This is actually, this is I think it's revolutionary when you read the way the Rambam understands the Gemara. You learn two things. Okay, I'll say it out right now so that people know what we're building toward. The Rambam's going to look at the Gemara and say that the reason matzah cooked is ruined is because we learned that if you were to cook meat, Korban Pesach, if you were to actually just cook it in water, you ruin the taste of that, and the two are connected. Taking a piece of meat from Korban Pesach and roasting it as is over the fire with a little bit of salt, the true taste is meat. But if you take that same piece of meat and cook it in a small volume of water with the same amount of salt, it might taste like, it tastes like lamb. You know what lamb tastes like, right? Lamb, whether you roast it or it's stewed, you could taste it, lamb, but it's not exactly the same. You ruin the taste of the lamb by boiling it. Right? That's what he learns. Okay, 1 second. We're getting a message. Is this a question about what we're learning? Okay, this is not a question about what we're doing. So we're going to not listen. We're gonna start seeing the sources here. Okay, Sefer HaChinuch says. Okay, we'll introduce the Sefer HaChinuch. The seventh mitzvah in the Sefer HaChinuch is Shelo l'chol Pesach na muvushal. The prohibition of eating Korban Pesach raw or partially cooked. Na might mean just be partially cooked, or muvushal, which is cooked, wet cooked. He says Mishorshei mitzvah, mitzvah zo, masha kasuv b'shchitaso. This kor gam yitzias mitzrayim. The point of eating this mitzvah, thou shalt not, is to remember the Exodus. It's all having to do with the remember the Exodus. By the way, when the Sefer HaChinuch gives you shrushim of the mitzvah, the sources, the roots of the mitzvah, it's often not. It's often not what you could find explicitly in the Talmud. It's more like his guess, his educated guess. But it doesn't mean this is unanimous. Everybody agrees to this. Often it doesn't fit, let's say, other monei hamitzvos like the Rambam. Okay, there are other people try to offer reasons. Read more Nevuchim. It doesn't sound like a Sefer mitzvos. Okay, or the Sefer HaChinuch. Sorry, it doesn't sound like a Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer mitzvah was written by the Rambam. V'zeu shenitztavinu le'ochlo. This is written wrong. Okay, tzali dafka. And what about the mitzvah that we were told, the positive mitzvah, dafka, eat it roasted? Lefi shekach derech b'nei melachim v'sarim le'chol basar tzali. It's the way of b'nei melachim, princes, and sarim also important people, to eat their meat specifically roasted. Shehu ma'achal tovu mutam, because that's a good way, it's tasty. We are told that the Chinuch says that we're told to eat it dafka roasted because that's the better way to eat it. That's the kingly way to eat it. Rest of people only get a little bit of meat, whatever they can get. Ki im vushal. So, like I mentioned before, they cook it in their soups or whatever so that they could fill themselves. They roast it, they get less. So you cook it, you don't lose any of the meat. That's what the Chinuch says. So roasting is the more kingly way of doing it. That's why the Torah commanded us to roast the Korban Pesach specifically. Let's ask some questions. Kasher. I'll ask some kashas and we'll end with this. Chada. The inyan sli keminag melachim kvar re'inu le'el sheino chiyuv dafka levasar matnos kahuna. This idea you must have gotten from the Gemara, where Rav Chisda said, "Sli is the best way to eat matanos," right? But adarab legabe kache kachim de chamiritvei. Kache kachim are more machmir than matanos. They're actual kachim. Matanos are chulin. The Kohen could share his matanos with a fellow Jew, right? Yesh lakonim lochlam mishulchan gavoa b'chol machol v'zel lamashcha. Says the actual korbanos they could eat any way they want, and that's based on their gedula. Says the privilege of the Kohanim and their greatness is they could eat their sacrificial meat any way they want. Hainu gedula lahem utrei, and the other kasha is ta'amo hamutza li'isur shvirat etzem kasher. It's also, we have a problem with what he says with regards to breaking the isser of breaking the Pesach's bones, which we haven't introduced yet. We'll talk about it, I guess, next time because we're running out of time now. So we'll leave it with questions and comments. Any questions, comments? No, so we'll go to sleep. I think I have to speak to someone else. So we'll close with the prayer that we live to see the destruction of our enemies. Of Yameinu Amen. Be well.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.